to talk to you about why we're celebrating the 25th anniversary, because I've only been here for 2.5 years. But what I can say, looks like I gotta, can I just get it?
Yeah, sure, there you
All right, get it and get on with it. What I can say is that the Climate Impacts Group had a major role in my education. I learned a lot about climate change, pursuing a PhD dissertation out in Colorado, and way back then, that would be like 2003 to 2006 or so, that I was really in the thick of it. The Climate Impacts Group was a major influence across the nation and globally at that point on impacts and adaptation work, and they were really there early and made a big difference. And it's one of the reasons that I decided to come out here, is because of the significance of the work that's being done by the Climate Impacts Group. So I think a lot of other people could say more about what the last 25 years has meant in this region and what the Climate Impacts Group's role has been. But I think it's looked very positive, and most of the people I've talked to have had a long, constructive relationship with us. But the 25th anniversary is also about looking forward. So it's not just about celebrating accomplishments, if you will, but what should the next 25 years look like? We're at a moment in time where people are talking about climate change and its impacts and what to do about it at a level that I've never experienced in my lifetime. And I think that's a very positive sign that this is a moment in history that we can seize. And I think that this piece of art is something that I hope we can look at and discuss and think about how we can seize that moment. So I have a lot of notes I was given about things that I should probably say, and I'm going to miss a few things, and I welcome corrections from anybody, but I do want to first thank Tess and Darcy, who's up on the screen there, and Amy, who I think were leading a lot of this effort to think about developing an art piece for part of the 25th anniversary. And I do want to also emphasize that the concept of working with artists is something just brand new for the Climate Impacts Group, and I haven't seen it really done much in the world of climate change. And I think that's something that is both really interesting, but also something we should pursue more frequently. We talk about co-producing climate change research with the people that need that input to make decisions. And I think this is a different kind of co-production, working with an artist about an issue that's so complicated and can be portrayed in so many different ways. And there was a lot of interaction in the way that this art piece was produced. There was, first developing the RFP, starting at that level, working with local artists to figure out how do you request a piece of art. We had no idea how to do that, and had to learn that from local experts, right? A kind of expertise we had never sought out at the Climate Impacts Group before. We evaluated those applications with the help of an artist mentor, Beverly Navis. Are you here? Right here. So we had help from an expert artist as well, who's an emeritus professor at UW-Tacoma, and I think worked with Claire to some degree as well in the development of the art piece. And then Claire herself spent a lot of time meeting with us virtually, due to COVID, but there was a lot of back and forth. At first, just kind of gathering information about what we thought about climate change, what was important to us to try and capture about it, a painting like this, but then kind of story mapping that and coming back to us with her ideas and working back and forth in the same kind of co-production model that has driven the Climate Impacts Group and the work that we do. So not only do I think that we got a great piece of art out of this, I think that we learned how to use a lot of the core tenets of the Climate Impacts Group in a new and different way, with new and different types of expertise and people. The idea of commissioning an art piece like this with the 25th year anniversary was to try and to speak to those impacts of climate change that are so important to us, but also portraying a hopeful vision for the future. It's easy to get caught in that negative of just seeing the things that are going on around you that cause emotional turmoil. But you have to still find that hope. That's why we show up at work every day and work on this issue, is to make a better tomorrow. And I think that we'll hear more about this piece from Claire and how she tried to capture and deal with that tension of a tragedy and hope. And then just because I have the mic and I have the moment to do so, I just wanted something I've been emphasizing more and more. I got into climate change because I cared about the environment. I think that's maybe where a lot of people came from that ended up in the climate change field, with some concern about the environment. And I've come to learn more and more as I've continued to work in this field that climate change isn't an environmental problem. It's really a human problem. It's irreducibly about people. And just in the brief time I've had to look at this piece of art, I feel like it really does capture that human nature of this challenge that we face. So I'm excited to spend some more time with it and to ponder this piece. I'll quickly introduce Claire before handing it off to her to present the piece. Claire Sianna Seaman grew up in Leavenworth, just on the eastern slope of the Cascade Mountains, for those of you who don't know where that is. She studied studio art with a concentration in climate change, which is an interesting combination, at Smith College, where she graduated with a bachelor's degree in 2020. We have learned a lot through this process, and really want to thank Claire for the thoughtfulness that she's approached this project with, and her openness to working with us, and really trying to capture every dimension of what we were hoping could be in this project. And she's done an incredible job of weaving this complex, heavy, difficult, and nuanced ideas into this stunning piece of art that I hope will spark conversations and lead to good conversations. So with that, I'll hand the mic to you, Claire.
I stand here. Can everyone hear?
Probably not the people online.
Give me one moment.
You're okay? Claire, say something.
Can you hear me?
All right, Darcy, are you able to see that okay?
Yes, I think you could maybe zoom in just a little bit.
Sure. And Claire, would you mind speaking up to see if there's something?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming this evening. My name is Claire, and I have had the privilege of working with the Climate Impacts Group on this project. Graduating from college, kind of a weird time. I didn't really know which direction I was going to go with art and climate change, and just being able to find this project that was perfectly calling to combine both is really giving me hope, not only for the future, that people are thinking more broadly about climate change and the fact that it's more of a cultural issue than an information issue. And well, to give some background, so I grew up in Leavenworth, as was said. And so my mom actually studied design here at the University of Washington. And my dad has worked with the Chelan County PUD on a lot of climate resilience projects. And so kind of coming from both of them, I think I took the seeds of both of those histories with me. And in college, I was always torn between art and climate change, feeling an obligation to study climate change and try and make a difference in that field, because it's the biggest problem humanity has ever faced. And I just don't see an option to do anything else. But then also naturally having always felt like an artist, and that's the thing that gives me the most joy. So I dealt with those conflicting conflicting wishes for a long time. And then my sophomore year of college, I took a class in which I read The Great Derangement by Amitav Ghosh. And that book definitely changed my life. He called for artists to make work about climate change, to show people a different way of imagining our reality. He said that, well, he's a fiction writer, so he was mostly talking about fiction, but it applies to all the arts, that we're really unimaginative. He wrote about how there was this crazy hurricane that happened where he's from in India, and it was just so, the phrase we all know is that truth is weirder than fiction. And so our imagination stops at a certain point, when really we should be allowing ourselves to imagine more than what people put in front of us or what we think we're allowed to believe. And knowing everything we know about climate change, it's so easy to get depressed really fast. And that, I don't know, I've never really been able to live with that. It's like people just accept that things are going to get really badly, go very badly. But it's like if someone's having a party and everyone's asking everyone else, are you going to go to the party? Because I only want to go if you're going to go. And then no one goes to the party, there's no party. But if everyone decides, I want this to happen, I'm going to try and make it happen, then we can all get there. At COP26 in Glasgow most recently, there was a woman speaking, and I put it in my my little write-up here. She is from, she's Samoan, and she was saying how she's a happy person and she wants to fight for that happiness. She wants to fight for what's making her happy. So I like to think about it in that sense, as opposed to trying to fight the bad, as we should be fighting to save the good. So anyway, back to being in college, I decided to study studio art and combine that with a concentration in climate change. In my senior work at college, I was doing this in my work, though it's really hard to mix those two departments. The art department wasn't really taking the climate change aspect seriously, and the environmental science department didn't really get what I was trying to do with art. So this project has been really refreshing, working with scientists who really want to help figure out how to express different ways of imagining a climate resilient future in art. Has been an incredible experience. And as far as the piece goes, obviously there's a lot going on. There's so much I could have put in that I just didn't have time for. It turns out that climate resiliency is a really complicated issue. And I'm not sure if I should kind of talk about some of the elements or if we should go to Q&A. So I decided to kind of cover, I was thinking in terms of Washington a lot, even though this is supposed to represent the entire Pacific Northwest. So here we have the west side, and this is Puget Sound, and the San Juans up here. Tried to make everything as accurate as possible, but as it's so much fitting into one image, not everything is representative of one exact place. So we have Puget Sound and Mount Rainier, which I put it down here, Tahoma Public School, to acknowledge the indigenous name for the mountain. And so we have a pod of orcas here. That's where Seattle would be. And then we go across to getting to the east side of the state or the region, where we have more of a desert zone. So I wanted to include both urban environments as well as rural environments, and kind of showing, because climate resiliency means different things in different places. So here we have also a lot of social resiliency and support. There's a free clinic, a center for resources for new residents, acknowledging that there is going to be a lot of climate immigration as places become less hospitable. And we're really lucky here to be in this amazing place where it's going to be still a nice climate for a while. And There's also an environmental learning center to make, this should be common knowledge. Everyone should have the opportunity to know how they exist in their environment and how that affects them and how they in turn affect the environment. No Buy Center, thrift, repair, and trade, kind of trying to support the idea of reusing items and making them last longer, sharing skills to that helps build community and creates less waste, less carbon emissions. Down here, I wanted to have the idea of connecting the east and west side. And so we have a group of people with signs that say water is life in 3 different languages. The one to the left is in Southern Lushootseed, which is in the Salish family of languages, which is spoken on the Pacific Northwest by Indigenous peoples. We have a community garden, which is arranged in permaculture, kind of a biodynamic way of farming, which can produce a lot of diverse food in a smaller place and doesn't need as many intense fertilizers and those kinds of things that we see in really unsustainable farming. Up above, you have people doing fuels reductions, which in an unhealthy forest, which then as you go to the right becomes a healthy forest, which then burns. And then you can see that the trees, instead of it becoming just a barren waste field, the trees survive and you have balsam root at the bottom to show that the forest has recovered. Below the garden, you have a community farmers market with people selling vegetables and crafts that they've made, going towards more of a economy that's sourced by people making local goods that are going to be more sustainable, longer lasting, and then you're also keeping that money more towards your neighbors instead of supporting products that have to travel thousands of miles to get to your door. What else? We have the salmon going through that bridge, and that is not a culvert. That is a nice bridge that's like good for salmon, good for wildlife to pass under. Over here we have a wildlife overpass like that you can see on I-90 with a public transportation metro system going underneath it. What else? Over here more. That's based on a photo of Wenatchee, which is really near Leavenworth, where I'm from. I was debating over whether to put the dam in there because ideally dams can cause problems, but it's such an important source of hydroelectric power that we really need to be able to develop other sources of energy. Have the hikers going up and huckleberry picking and fishing by native peoples who have the right to fish these waters, although a lot of tribes are still fighting for the right to be able to fish in their traditional rivers. And then I also wanted to kind of show how salmon is so important, not only for the orcas we have over here, but people depend on them for food, as well as bears and other animals. And then, of course, you have wind energy up there, hydro, and then solar over here. And I think that's the bulk of the content. So yeah, thank you again very much for coming. And I think we're doing Q&A now.
Over and stand with you. Thanks so much for walking us through this. It was so cool. I mean, I've been looking at it for several hours now and soaking it in, but it was really nice to hear you kind of walk through it. And yeah, I mean, I'm just amazed. It's beautiful. It's intricate. I couldn't, when we put out this RFQ, I couldn't have imagined what would come of it or that it would look like this. So thank you so much. Yeah, so we're gonna do a little Q&A now. we have some folks online, and Allie, my friend Allie, will be moderating the Q&A online. So we can start with a question here and then move over to there and see if anyone online has a question. So who's got questions for Claire?
Where will your painting reside? I
So
mean, after it's here. If this is here, will it become part of the property of the University of Washington?
Yes.
yeah, I can answer that. So it's going to start here, and we're actually in talks with several different units, buildings on campus to have it displayed in their buildings. So my hope is that for about a year or so, it will rotate to different buildings on campus where people can see it, and then kind of be housed in the climate impacts group suite in Wallace Hall, where people coming in and out can see it. And we're getting pictures of it, so it will also live online where everyone is. So yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. Beverly, sure, yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment and congratulate Claire for this masterful work. I got to go visit it in September, and she had finished just the right side and a little bit of the middle at that point, and it's just remarkable to see how much you were able to accomplish in that time. But I also wanted to say, for those of you who aren't aware, there is a movement, an international movement of ecological artists that has been around for over 2.5 decades, working on the climate emergency in a lot of different ways. So some of them are doing work that is involved in direct action and protest. Others are doing eco-restoration projects that are public art pieces. Some of the artists are involved in trying to wake people up, and others are trying to inspire people with ideas of how to deal with the collapse of modernity. We don't need a system that is so inequitable anymore. So we have to hospice this system. And what are we going to grow in place of it? That's what my work is about. And I encourage you that I have an exhibition up at the Tacoma Community College Art Gallery until December 10th. It deals with what are we going to put in its place. And there is an eco art network online that people can go to, so you can see more work by artists who are working in collaboration with scientists. And it's more and more of it's happening. Artists are pretty savvy about what's happening and have been for a while. Unfortunately, a lot of traditional art departments are still very conservative. And at UW Tacoma, we created the very first course in ecological art on a public university campus. But there are many, many other courses being offered now at different universities. So I just wanted people to be aware of that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Beverly. Yeah,
You're
that's
welcome.
nice to know. Yeah. Allie, do we have any questions online? Not yet. Nope. All right, online folks. Okay, yeah.
I guess, through the process of producing this piece, has your perspective or approach to how, an art's role in supporting, the fight against the climate crisis, has anything changed, or have you learned anything in that process?
I guess I hadn't, before I hadn't looked so deeply into the actual science and thinking about how that could translate into art. In my past work, I had painted images that I had kind of collected of just kind of like symptoms of it, I guess, or just like I have a painting of a man looking out a window at a wind turbine. And I have a painting of like a meat counter at Pike Place Market, and just like kind of things that you'd see around that would remind you that things are changing and that the climate is changing. But this was really looking at the broader spectrum of cause and effect, and the bad stuff that's going to happen, and like how it's going to be good. So I think going forward, I'm definitely going to have that bigger lens, kind of acknowledging how my painting is situated historically as well as going into the future. So I think that's definitely been a good outcome for my personal work, is that it's going to be a lot more in-depth and informed.
Allie? No? Gosh, I have kind of lots of detailed questions about how you do it. I'm really interested to know like how much you use photos, and then she mentioned you had one panel done. I was wondering if you do like layers versus working across. I'm just kind of interested to know a little bit more about how you do it.
Yeah, so I started with them always all together, almost always. And I started just by sketching out the basic composition. And actually the first thing I did was the storm up here. Oh, I forgot to mention, that's supposed to represent more extreme weather events. And then I did kind of the top half first, because I kind of knew what that was going to look like. And then I ended up figuring out that I wanted to do, well, I painted in all the green below, and it was really hard to figure out what to do on the bottom half. It was really hard because trying to prioritize what parts are going to be included and what that's going to look like. And I probably had maybe not 1,000, but kind of up there, different images I was looking at from just Google Images, or people that I knew had taken a photo of something at some point. Just trying to kind of piece together what things look like. And I'm a very oriented kind of OCD painter. I'm not as much broad strokes and everything. I like things to look a certain way, and that's, I don't know, that's just how I do it. Other painters like to get more loose with it, and which is all great. But I really like to know that it's going to look the way that it is to a certain extent. So I kind of, after that, I did the waterfall, and then I just tried to figure out, I kind of had the city sketched out for a while, but then trying to figure out how to put them all together was definitely a process that I finally arrived at.
We have an online question. This is from Simona. Simona, I'm not sure if you'd like to come on video and ask your question yourself, but you're welcome to.
Sure. Hello. Hi, everyone. I was just curious a little bit more about the collaborative process and like who you met with specifically. I know you just talked about how you generated some of the imagery, but I'm curious what that looked like in terms of like working with communities. I know a lot, like the school building you mentioned, that was a call over to the original name for Mount Rainier. So I'm just curious like how you were working within communities. Thank you. And it's beautiful, by the way.
Yeah. So I think I talked with almost every member of the climate impacts group. Is that right? And so we did 2 or 3 initial meetings where everyone introduced themselves and kind of talked about what they did and what they think is important in climate resilience. And then I kind of processed all that information and made a presentation about what I was planning on including and how, and then brought that back to everyone and had us all go over it again. And then I had a few questions here and there afterward to kind of send to people and hear some feedback. One thing that I was really kind of questioning for a while was how to represent Native people in the painting, because they're so important in climate resilience and deserve to be very well acknowledged in general, but especially looking at climate resiliency and how to go forward. So I spoke with Professor Brain from the University of Washington, as well as Connie McLeod, who at the time was the cultural director of the Puyallup tribe, and Mary Big Bull Lewis, who is a member of the Colville Confederated tribe and also is a business owner and activist in Wenatchee. And so speaking with them, I asked them kind of what they thought the most important, like what were the things I really needed to show and what was a respectful way to do that. And so that's why I decided to include Water is Life down here and Lachute seed to represent that the language will still be active and that people will be learning it and using it. And it was definitely agreed that water is life is a really important phrase for all of its meanings, that we need to maintain clean water and not sacrifice that for an oil pipeline, for instance. And then also having the fishing platforms here and just kind of showing Native people being able to continue their traditional ways of life. So yeah, it was really awesome. I feel super lucky to have had the opportunity to get all of these perspectives and be the one to put it together. It was really inspiring and I learned a lot. And everyone from the Climate Impacts Group has a really good sense of the fact that things are happening, but that we can do things about it and that we should be looking at what we can do. And that was really great to kind of hear that from people who are so deep into the science of it. Yeah.
Question. Okay, so one of the things that I noticed about this piece is that it's a triptych, or it's a 3-panel piece. And when I think about triptychs, I think about Hieronymus Bosch and the Garden of Earthly Delights, and kind of showing, you know, the juxtaposition of heaven, earth, and hell. And while this isn't kind of like a linear Garden of Earthly Delights, we do see what could happen in a bad way and what we could see, you know, moving from like scarcity to abundance. And so I'm just curious, like, why the triptych was chosen and how thinking about this piece in segments maybe like altered your relationship to the art that you were creating.
Well, there was a moment there where I was kind of thinking about doing a chronological progression, but I don't know what's going to happen. I'd rather show the bad things and the good things happening at once, because there are definitely going to be things happening that aren't great, like wildfires on the west side and extreme weather events, and all this stuff is going to happen. But if we can exist happily within that, that's great. And the triptych was the main reason, I think, was because I wanted to do a big piece, but it would have been impossible to transport and even keep square. I did study in Italy my junior year of college, which I think definitely influenced my style. I got to see that piece. It's one of my favorites. It's amazing. And I also do like how it kind of separates geographically, and it gave something to work off of in terms of the composition. So this is actually the first triptych I've done, but I enjoyed it. I think I'll do more.
Speaking of, we did get a comment from Heather and Pat Murphy, who are Leavenworth Career Forest Service friends. And they wanted to say, thank you, Claire, for sharing your knowledge, talent, visions. I really love each panel as a standalone lesson in art. Then the stunning combination of all three. You give us the hard talk concerns, but also the hope of how we can change.
Thank you, Heather. And Pat. Yes.
Yeah, I'm sort of taken with the parachutists or flight or whatever, but it's an interesting thing to put right there at the horizon for observers. Are they looking ahead? I mean, is there a story to them, or was it just something you thought you wanted to have that there?
Well, My boyfriend Devin, who's here with us, is a paraglider, and I just think that's such a beautiful way to be a part of the environment and see. I don't know. I think from that perspective, you kind of could see everything that's going on, and I felt like there wasn't enough going on up there, and it's inspiring when people find different ways to be in this environment, and climate change is definitely going to change the thermals and how that sport operates. So I guess you can always find tie-ins when it comes to climate change, but
An interesting picture without it too, but I like it. It's playful.
What's next, Claire? I mean, this must have spun so many thoughts and ideas for you.
well, immediately after this, I'm going to be doing a piece, much smaller piece for an artist residency about the making work about the Wenatchee Valley watershed, which goes from Lake Wenatchee down to the city of Wenatchee, which runs into the Columbia. Yeah, that residency happened in the spring. And I'm going to be doing a piece that's depicting a salmon at the end of its life cycle, kind of on the rocks, because I think that says a lot more than just the salmon itself. A beautiful life cycle of having done what it needed to do and giving back. And yeah, salmon are just a keystone species, so important. But after that, I'm hoping to get to do some more of my own work and grad school eventually, probably photography and studying more cultural aspects of climate change.
Did you learn about how you work? Do you work better in the mornings, at night when everything's still, or what did you learn about yourself through this?
Better to have the whole day. Because I have to worry about going to work in the afternoon. Definitely like limits how deep you can get into it. But yeah, it was an interesting experience, I think, because I usually work off an image and I know exactly what I'm painting, but this was really different. So I think process changes with every piece.
How many hours collectively?
I don't even know. It was a lot.
Yeah, so I just want to say, I've taken quite a bit of time to look at this piece from different distances, and up close, there's so much detail. From the back, you see the whole picture, and every time I look at this, I see, there's so many different pieces to this climate resiliency puzzle, right? There's, community work, there's forestry, hydrology, there's so many different pieces. And I was wondering if you could, in this process, if you could speak on like what part of that climate resilience puzzle really spoke to you, like what part of this really, elicited some sentimental, feelings.
I would say probably more the garden going into the urban areas, because I'm obviously from a very rural area that has a lot of green going on. Everyone has a garden in their backyard. And I'm really aware that not everyone can have that. We don't have the space to put 8 billion people all with their own house and yard and everything. And there's also an element to that you have less community if you're not with your neighbors. And so being able to make the cities places that are, being in Seattle here on UW campus, it feels really good because there's a lot of beautiful architecture, there's green everywhere, but going to other places with really dense populations, we kind of know that having denser populations and more dense populations and less area is kind of a more sustainable way for people to live because you don't have to have as much transportation. Everything's kind of concentrated. So the thing that kind of brings me the most hope is thinking about making cities really green and really sustainable and just beautiful places to be. So you think about what do humans need to be happy? If there's plants around, people are way happier. I know that if I go into we went into a plant shop earlier today and I was like, oh, this is so nice. I feel so relaxed in here. There's so many simple things that we can do that will make such a difference. And if we're able to produce more food in urban areas, that helps cut down on food insecurity so much. And just all of these elements have, it's you can accomplish so many different things by doing one thing, like having a garden, for instance. It makes people happier. It costs less. The food is better. It's more nutritious. You don't have to worry about people not being able to afford food. So I think that's probably where I get most inspired, is thinking about creating these beautiful places and all the effects, domino effects they're going to have for the whole population.
Sure, I just want to say that that you've done a phenomenal thing. It's really beautiful and it's really complicated and it's really rich. And in all of my conversations with Claire as she was going through this process, I'm also with the Climate Impacts Group for those I haven't met. We would be talking about one aspect, maybe, I don't know, sea level rise or maybe forest fires. And then we'd be like, but wait, it can't just be about that, because it's not just natural hazards, it's also changes to the way people live. And it's not just bad, but it's good. And it's not just urban, but it's rural. And it's not just west side, but it's east side. And every time we said anything like that, Claire nodded and smiled and said, I want to get it all. And I thought, well, gosh, how is she going to do that? Every time I try to talk about it, it's hard to pack in the complexity and the richness. I mean, not to make it complex, but to pack in the multidimensionality of the issue. And I just want to say it's amazing. And you've captured so much right on the surface of the richness, and also in the way you talk about all the different dimensions of what it means to have a city and what it means to connect to the rural. And it's really amazing. So thank you for that. And I want to add on to your question and ask you the bigger what next question, not what next, but so Claire has a magic wand, and Claire is an amazing artist and is focused on climate change, and she wants to change the way those things connect in the world. What would be something, a secret wish of some way you could use those two secret powers?
Like a literal magic wand or a metaphorical one?
I'm sorry, I don't have a literal one. But if you had a literal one, I was trying to get it bigger than the next 2 years, but sort of just thinking about, you've done really innovative things by majoring in art and concentrating in climate change. And, in an institution that wasn't ready to bring those two things together, and you've seen the beginning of where that can take you. And I think you have a lot of opportunity for creating new mashups or breaking down other walls. And you might have some in mind that you want to share with us.
Well, first of all, thank you. It's a lot. Well, I am planning on hoping to travel for a while and then begin grad school in the fall of 2023. And my plan right now, it's not official because I need to do some more research, but I'm really looking at the Human Geography program at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And I had my favorite professor in college was a film professor, and he really involved a lot of human geography readings from the artistic perspective. But I just really loved being exposed to that way of thinking about the world because everything's connected. And I think that's really beautiful to be able to see all those connections and bring them together. And that's absolutely the way that I think about climate change and just how everything we do is connected to something else, for better or for worse. And so my plan is to continue down that route, and I need to look into if they have any, if I would have the ability to mix that with art, or if I would just go into more the research and then use that to keep creating art. There's a really amazing filmmaker, Brett Story, who I think it might be her most recent film. I don't know if she's made anything since then. It's called The Hottest August. And it's a documentary about climate change, but it's not a documentary as you'd think of one. Basically, her and her film crew just went out into Manhattan and just filmed whatever they came across that they found interesting. And at that time, it was the hottest August on record in New York. And so it's a really beautifully done documentary, and it's so rich with images and just, we're in a really interesting time, and there's so much potential for art because it's so complicated, and there's beautiful things happening, and we're at this crux of so much social change, and you can see how so many things are getting better, but it's also like there's potential that everything's just going to go totally downhill so fast. And so she kind of captures that in this film as well. And she came and spoke in a class. And I just really enjoyed that perspective of being able to talk about climate change in a way that's totally different from like the documentaries with the talking head and sculptures made out of trash. It's like, we need to think bigger than that because it's not just its own category, it's everything. And so I really love the research aspect of this project and really diving into like the hard facts. So I'd like to continue with that research, but be able to make it into other artwork, be it film or more traditional like oil painting, or consulting with different organizations to make work, or I don't know, I'd be interested in a lot of different things and kind of see where it goes.
Anyone else have a question? Were you gonna ask a question?
I'm not gonna try and follow Amy's statement and question with mine, so.
This is one, if we were able to have food and drink, I think we'd be raising a toast to Claire
Okay.
and her peace and her future and her father. And her family. And her- So to Claire.
Thank you so much, everyone. I actually have no idea what time it is, but it might be around 4:15 or so. Oh, someone's clapping. Yeah, we have this room till 5 p.m. You're welcome to stay and mingle and ask questions, or if anyone has a burning question they want to ask now. Okay, but before we do that, I just wanted to say a really heartfelt thank you to Claire and Beverly. We, as a little, Taylor, would you mind grabbing and maybe grab someone else? This is perfect. We have these flowers for you as just a little way to say thank you so much for your time and energy and just beautiful, beautiful work. So small, you know, token of bright colors to kind of match your beautiful work. So again, thank you so much, and really glad that everyone could be here today and ask all your amazing questions, and that you could, yeah, I mean, it's so funny, we have never even met in person, we've been working together for 8 months. So it's just so nice to meet you in person and see your amazing art, and yeah, and also for Claire's statement, written statement is on that stand there, so you can do that, take a closer look at the painting. And again, thank you all so much for coming. Really glad that we were able to do this. So yeah.
I'd like to say thank you to Devin too for making these
yes.
easels and the easels I painted on and the frames for the canvases and the transportation rack and like pretty much everything except for the painting. So. Yeah.
I know. It's actually, I feel like I can smell them from here.
I don't know how to say hi to